Let's have a first look at CL project. I just opened CL project here, and this is the declaration. The first thing that you see is a lot of commands, and that's because, well, I'm writing a lot of comments in my source in order to help me debug and find my way around problems. That is part of my best practice course that you can also find on my website. The second thing that you see is that I have a log in each class and in each object, in fact, and the reason for that is also in my best practice class, so I refer you to that one. Now the object part itself. The first thing is the name of the class. CL project is class. That's the standard syntax, and that is written automatically for you when you create a class. These two lines are done automatically. The next line is the first interesting part. It says that the CL project class inherits of CL error, which means that all the method here from the CL error are automatically available in the CL project. Then, as you can see, I have the private keyword, and we saw earlier that the private keyword allows me to say that this three variable here, or members as they are called in object, are usable only inside the CL project class. Which is why if I need to access this information outside the project class, I need to have methods like this one, getDataDir, to get the corresponding information. So if you have a look at the getDataDir, it is just returning the information. Okay. I also have a getInformation in which I'm building a string, and as you can see, it is a string with different parameters in it, where I return the name of the executable, the data directory, the INA file, and so on. This is what you can see in the information window that we saw earlier. So that's how it's done. Very, very simple. As you can see, there's nothing really to fear in this class. What do you have? The constructor is empty, as I was telling you, but I have an init project method just there doing what is needed in the initialization of the project. So what do? I set the executable name in a variable. That is a name that I use after that to name directories, do this, do that, and always under the name of my current project. And I'm not using a function for that, because there are different functions that can return this kind of thing, exit name, this, that, and the other. But these functions are returning different value depending if you are in test mode, in executable mode instead of web, classic or RWP. You don't get the same value. And because in different parts of the project you may be in different mode and you may need to really get that always the same way, I prefer to use a constant. Now, I told you not 10 minutes ago that in a class you should never access something that is global to the project. And the first thing that I'm doing is breaking that rule. I think that I heard sometime that the rules are made to be broken, and that is voluntarily breaking my own rule. Why? Because when I put this class inside a project, I want to make sure that I will not forget in the project initialization code to set my project name to the value that I want in this project. And for that, just copy the class in another project, and now I have a compiling error saying that CST project name is not known. And I just have to create it inside the project and put the name in it. And I'm in fact using the fact that I'm breaking my own rule in order to not forget to do something when I include my class inside a project. Yes, there is a method to my madness, but sometimes you need some explanation. So after that, what are we doing in the init project? We are doing creation of data directory name. This is where the file will be. So I'm using something that should be available whatever operating system you're on. And then I'm creating the directory if necessary. Of course, this is the error management. And you can see that here I'm putting a value inside an error code variable, and there was no error code variable anywhere in the class. This is because this variable here, if I do F2, I can see where it is, and it is in the initialization of the CLError class. And you can see this time that the variable is protected instead of private. And it is protected because I want the classes that are using CLError to be able to directly set value and read value inside this variable. So we are seeing here immediately the concept that we are talking about with the protected, the private, and all that. Of course, you will have to study all these classes more closely because there are lots of things in them, and we won't have the time to go in the details of everything. But just to show you example, a real-life example of all the concepts that we have seen before. So that is the initialization of the project. Then look at that. We are doing this line, very important, allows to tell the program that all its internal parameters should be stored inside an XML file and not inside the registry or inside an INA file, which are the three possible options. And the reason for that, well, the INA file is limited to 64 kilobits, so that may be not enough. The registry is a common thing that you cannot move around, that you cannot really always access easily. And the XML is basically whatever you need. Now, the XML choice has one problem, is that if it can be broken. It happens if you have a crash during the exit of the application, during the time it's trying to write in it. And what we want to do is delete the file and redo the thing. So all that is managed here. You see, again, you're gaining a few days of debug when you don't understand why suddenly you have problems when you're starting a program. That's already managed. Now, we are storing in the INA file, we have a small INA file in which we are storing all the information, and this is the name of this INA file. And then, last thing that we're doing for the project, we are automatically initializing the random engine, which is something that you should always do in your program and you probably always forget to do. So as you can see, there's nothing really exceptional in there, but this is where you put anything you need to do when the project is initialized. What else do we have? The get data here we already saw. Constructor, destructor are empty. Get information we saw. Get INA file directory, again it's just returning the value, so anywhere in the project you can know where is your INA file. And we have the history class in which we are storing, I'm storing all the log of all the updates that I'm doing in this class. So that's, again, I refer you to the best practice course. So that's the CL project class. After that we have the CL data class that we already talked about. CL data, you can see that this one inherits of two different classes. And be careful, because objects are very powerful, but not all systems are created equal. By example, on Android, you cannot inherit of two different classes. You can inherit from a class which itself inherits from a class, but currently you cannot inherit from several classes. So this would not work in Android. You need to know what the limits are. again the different variables that are used by the class, and here you can see that I have regular variable, and then here I have an associative array of string. Each entry will contain the list of fields for a file. Entries will be built when they are needed only. So what is that? Well, you'll see later where we're using this. But you can see you can have any type of variable inside your class, really. Here, connection for the file, user login, and so on. So what else do we have in the CLDB class? We have a create all files method. This is used to create all files in a loop. Why? Well, because unfortunately when you do hcreation if not found of all files, in some cases you may have problems because some files are in one directory, some files are in another, some files are this type, some files are that type, and the links between the files mean that you cannot create them all at the same time. You have to create them in a loop. That's something that you need to know. It's happening from time to time. You have the init database, in which all the initialization is done depending of the type of the database, with the password and all this kind of thing. By the way, if you're using my my class to manage your file, please change the password, and don't come back to me later telling me that you forgot to replace the password, because the password is called should be replaced. Really, please change the password. Set DB mode, as you can see, is currently just that. Set user login is one of these entry points where you are telling the database that the user login is this. And why are you doing that? Well, because we have the hadd and hmodify function inside the CLDB. Why do we have that? Well, because what I'm doing is not using the regular hadd, I'm using my own method. And my own method is doing extra stuff automatically for me on hadd. By example, if in my file I have one variable named GUID plus the name of the file, then it means that I automatically want to have a GUID in each record, which is something that is extremely useful when you want to do replication between many different computers, and you don't want to use the built-in replication. So that is something, but that is something that is going to be done only if the field exists. And as you can see, there's a function there testing if the field exists. In order to do that, what do? I put all the field of the file inside my associative array of field, and then I look into it if it's there. Why do I do it this way? Because it's much faster to do it this way, store the variable inside the associative array, than to each time you do you need to test a field to go ask the system for the list of all the fields of the file and go through it. You do it only one, you store them, and it's much faster this way. Again, optimization that I added after seeing that it could become quite slow. So if the file contains a field of this name, we are putting a GUID in it, and this GUID is coming from a class called getNewGUID, a method called getNewGUID, which is from the CLGUID class. Now, why do we have a CLGUID class? It's because the function, built-in function in WinDev, returning a GUID, did not exist when this was written. Now in 18 you don't need that. You could just call the getGUID function that is part of the W language. So Again, this is something that you can use with older versions of WinDev. Now, same thing, if there is a S created by field in my file, then I'm putting the user login in it. If there is a DT created date in my file, then I'm putting the date and time in it. And then I'm going the regular W language hadd. Same thing in the h modifier, except that it's not the same field that are automatically filled. Sorry. I'm filling automatically last modified by and last modified date, and certainly not the GUID and not the created by. So as you can see, you can do whatever you want inside your hadd and hmodify function, and that is an alternative to the trigger system. Trigger system that I'm not using for two reasons. First, when I first coded this, triggers just were not available, and second, this works all the time, is easily debug, and is not working once in a while or not in a while, and you don't know why. There is a limit to the black box concept, and from this kind of important stuff I prefer to do it myself. Let's have a very quick look at the other basic classes. CL error basically has just a few members where we store the error information, and then there is a function to set the error in the class and function to get the error from the class. There is even a display of the last error, and this display is done this way. As you can see, it's first doing a trace, then sending the error as an email, and then displaying the error. This is a code that may work in WebDev, but not all the time. It depends when you're calling it. But in every case, this is going to work. So when you're calling this method, you are always sending it to your support automatically. And after that, everything will work the same way. So if you want a different behavior, that's where you do it. Then you have the CL email class. The CL email class, again, is really doing things to send the email, and only for that. So it's storing the information needed for that, and you have in it only enough to give the object other parameters to connect to a SMTP server, and after that just a method to send a very simple email with a subject and a body. That's all. It's just basic class for the other to use to send inside information. CL error we already saw. CL GUID is even simpler and even not needed anymore, because now there is a function, a built-in function to create a GUID, so that is not needed anymore, except if you want to use that in older version of WinDev or WebDev. And then we have the CL log class. The CL log class, as we saw earlier, is a little different because it is using both global and non-global methods. So the CL log class needs a little more review. As you can see here, the icon is different and tells you that each of this method is global. So this is a method that allows you to get log data from inside the log file and display it any way you want on the screen. This is a method to stop the log, start the log, change the mode of the log, do the trace. And then you have the constructor and the destructor. And here we need to look at it. Because here I'm doing something in the constructor. What am I doing? The constructor can get parameters, and you can see that the name is standard because I don't know what I want to log when I'm going to need to log something. So I can pass as many as 6 different parameters. And I'm going to create here a trace with that information. So just this is going to do the trace when the object is created automatically. In the destructor that is just below, we're going to do the exact same thing. We're going to say, okay, here we are exiting off the original code. You see that the code name is set and stored in the object in the constructor automatically, so I always know where this was called. And here I'm just saying that I'm exiting of it. So with just the creation of an object somewhere, I can get both the log when the object is created and the log when the object is deleted, which is extremely useful because I can find out if an object has not been deleted, and I can find out if it's deleted, where it's deleted. If I forget to delete something, it's visible with that function. Let's have a look at what the CL form is supposed to do. That's what you need to do when you want to code the class. Of course, here it's already coded, but imagine that you want to create a class that manages forms. Whether they are in WinDev or WebDev, you want to manage that concept. And the CL form manages as much of a form as possible. That's your target. It has to work on any file, and on any file it means that it has to be completely generic. You have to give the name of the file as a parameter. That's one entry that you already know. It going to initialize the form. CL form saves the form, save the content of the form, do stuff when the form closes, manages mandatory field. All that are basic function of form management. And then you can also, and that's the part where the dynamic is extremely interesting, you also want not to open the same record twice. Remember when we saw the functioning of the project before, that if you click a second time on the same record, then you just put in focus the form already containing that record, and that's all. And that is done from code that is inside the class, so very easily reusable. It keeps a list of open form. You've seen that list displayed. And of course, because you have a list of all the open form, you can close them all if you need be. That's perfectly possible. Could it do more? Absolutely. By example, it could allow to save the content of a form inside a sandbox. Why? Well, the user starts entering data in one form. He has a call from somebody else. Opens a second form. As you can see, you can do that easily here. Then a third one, and a fourth one. Enter data here and there, and doesn't save and stops the computer. What do you do with the modification? The user didn't validate them. What do you do when the new forms that are not completed? They may not be recordable in their own file because, well, there are some fields that are mandatory are not filled yet. So what you do is you save that in a sandbox, in another record under another format where there's no constraint, and you automatically offer to the user to reopen that sandbox form later, and all that can be managed inside the class. And no, that part is not done yet.